From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The Republican House is still stuck in stalemate as Kevin McCarthy loses a fourth vote for Speaker with a fifth vote ongoing. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnist Kim Strassel and editorial board member Monet Ukwe-Barua. Well, it's deja vu all over again, as Yogi Berra might say, in the Republican House, with the majority of the GOP caucus continuing to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be their speaker, and a rump faction standing in the way. As a reminder, the vote on the first ballot yesterday was 212 for Democrat Hakeem Jeffries, 203 for Kevin McCarthy, and 19 Republicans naming somebody else. By the end of yesterday, that number had grown from 19 to 20, with the defection of Florida Congressman Byron Donalds joining the non-McCarthy faction. Here's how he explained himself on Fox News this morning.
I had signaled to people I would vote for Kevin on ballot 1. I was possible on a ballot 2. I made that vote. At that point, we were basically deadlocked, and it was pretty clear that he didn't have the votes. So my thoughts is, okay, if he doesn't have the votes, what are we going to do as a conference to either find someone who can get to 218 or at a minimum adjourn what we were doing, get off the floor so the needed negotiations can happen. I think that it was actually not in a good place for the Republican conference to stay on the House floor yesterday and continuously vote.
In the first vote today, Donalds himself was nominated for Speaker, and here is Texas Congressman Chip Roy doing the honors.
But there's an important reason for nominating Byron, and that is this country needs a change. This country needs leadership that does not reflect this city, this town that is badly broken.
The result of that vote was 212 for Hakeem Jeffries, 201 for Kevin McCarthy, 20 for Donalds, and 1 vote of present. So, Kim, over the course of these 1.5 days so far, the result is that Kevin McCarthy has lost 2 votes, and that's it.
Yeah, so just to catch everyone up on what has happened since yesterday, when the House adjourned at the end of those first 3 votes in the afternoon, Republicans went to a bunch of back rooms. McCarthy dispatched a number of his allies to try to talk some more to those who do not support his speakership. Those went late into the night. A little bit more information came out about what had blown things up. Remember, over the weekend, there was the prospect that there might be some deal to be made. We're now hearing that when Republicans went into an all-caucus meeting prior to those 3 votes yesterday, that McCarthy apparently was quite belligerent about the holdouts, which only angered them further. And now this has kind of poisoned the well. So they had these late-night discussions. It didn't appear to yield anything. Notably, Donald Trump wandered in this morning and said everyone should vote for Kevin McCarthy. It was quite striking that nobody seemed to listen to him, and in fact voted no again. Interestingly, the vote total changed even more on that fourth vote as a further Republican, Representative Victoria Spartz, decided to vote present this time. She had voted for McCarthy on the first 3 ballots yesterday, now has moved to present. All of this is looking not great for McCarthy because it sounds as though what's happening here is the rebels have decided that they're simply going to stand pat and send the message that as long as they do, he cannot be elected Speaker of the House. They are slowly picking up a vote or here too, as well as they go along. And it just seems as though everything's at a stalemate.
I'll read a piece of the President Trump statement. This is him speaking on Truth Social. He said, "Republicans do not turn a great triumph into a giant and embarrassing defeat. It's time to celebrate. You deserve it. Kevin McCarthy will do a good job and maybe even a great job. Just watch." And I agree with Kim that the response from the Republican rebels was pretty notable. Matt Gaetz, the Florida Republican instigator in all situations, has responded to President Trump saying, "Sad, this changes neither my view of McCarthy nor Trump nor my vote." And Monet, I'm not sure, maybe that's a reflection of President Trump's waning influence on the Republican Party, a reflection of the recent midterm results. I'm not sure, but I agree with Kim that it is striking that nobody seems to be taking President Trump's advice here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that part of the reason for the rift appeared to be that there's a certain faction of the party that sees itself as being Trumpist in the sense of being anti-establishment, and that they would both be willing to take the president's guidance and more directly would be afraid of putting themselves at odds with him. So I think that I certainly would have predicted beforehand that if Trump was going to come out and take a strong position, then that would at least influence some of the lawmakers. But it seems as if their desire to be anti-establishment is not completely tied to President Trump and his place in the party in the ways that it previously had been. I do think that there are some issues that are underlying the rift. It isn't all just about politicking and what the brand of the House majority is going to be. And Matt Gaetz, in that same response that he made to President Trump, also said that the biggest loser of their move to block McCarthy from becoming the speaker was Volodymyr Zelensky. So basically, he was saying it's the intention of these Republican holdouts in the House to block additional funding from the Ukraine war effort. And I think that that presents a huge challenge for any potential candidate who would step in after McCarthy's failure and try to coalesce the caucus around a new person, because that person basically would have to decide whether they would be willing to play ball on the issue of Ukraine funding, which is going to be one of the major roles that House Republicans have in Congress. And so I think that that's an issue that creates a huge impasse between the anti-establishment candidates and the moderates. And anyone who is thinking about throwing their hat in the ring is going to have to think about what position they're going to take on that issue.
As we're taping this, the fifth vote seems to be wrapping up. This is the second vote today. And again, it looks like nothing has changed according to the C-SPAN tally. 212 votes for Hakeem Jeffries, 201 for Kevin McCarthy, 20 for Donalds, 0 for anyone else, and 1 vote for president. So the same, we're in stalemate. Nothing has moved yet today. Kim, what about the idea of adjourning again? On Tuesday, the House adjourned on a voice vote. There was at least one guy I heard on the C-SPAN stream who yelled no, but it seemed like there was general agreement that 3 votes was enough for a Tuesday, and Republicans could go have a meeting and try to figure this out. I mean, one question is whether they can get that kind of agreement again today, but is there anything to the idea of adjourning and having Republicans go back to the conference room and try to figure this out of public view?
It would seem to make the most sense, especially given we've again now had 2 more votes. It doesn't seem to have changed anything. This isn't likely to get settled on the floor. There are 2 options here. And I think it's notable that McCarthy hasn't gone with the one that his team suggested that they were going to go with. When all of this kicked off, he made it sound as though he was just going to keep everybody in their seats and wear them down until they essentially said, okay, this is enough, and we're going to go with McCarthy. It takes a long time to do these roll call votes. Everyone's patience with it seems to have waned after about 3 rounds of voting on the first day, and so they adjourned. That might not be the case today, but not because of McCarthy. It sounds as though his team wanted today maybe not even to have a first vote or second vote because they knew that it wasn't going to turn out in their favor, that they wanted to adjourn. But it had been made pretty clear. The Democrats have broadcast that they would potentially object against that because they are enjoying the spectacle of watching Republicans go through this again and again. And it sounded as though the rebels would vote with them because they want to keep making their point on the floor. They would like to repeat and make it clear over and over that McCarthy does not have the support he needs. So there is a possibility that there'll be an attempt at an adjournment and that could be blocked. Again, you heard Byron Donalds. I think he's right, at least some in that faction, those that are more open to trying to get to a solution here, do see the merit of continuing to have discussions, but that is not a position that is held widely across the caucus and those in the rebel position.
But that raises the question of what other options the House has here. And one that I've heard floated is that a majority of the House can set the rules for selecting the speaker. So right now, the rule is that the Speaker of the House has to get a majority of the House, which means 218 votes. But a majority could also vote to lower that threshold to a plurality winner. The problem with that is you have 20 people who have decided that they're not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy. So right now, the plurality winner is Democrat Hakeem Jeffries. And so McCarthy doesn't gain anything by changing the rules to a plurality winner. unless he wants to play a game of chicken with these people, do you really not like me enough that you're going to make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the Republican House? But Monet, another option I've seen floated this morning that is a little intriguing to me is a majority could vote to have the next ballot be by secret ballot. And I think that would be a fascinating exercise. And that would allow anybody who is anti McCarthy to stay anti McCarthy while leaving some mystery about whose votes are changing, if that's what needs to happen to get to a Speaker of the House here. And I don't know how likely that possibility is, but once you get the House to the standpoint of we need to change some kind of rules to break the stalemate, it does raise the questions of what kind of possibilities exist out there.
Yeah, the secret ballot idea is fascinating. I think it's completely possible that among the 20 or so Republicans who have held out against McCarthy, many of them really would have no problem with him being Speaker in practice. They're merely trying to signal that they're against the establishment wing of the party and show their voters that they want to put up an alternative. But if they were able to cast their votes in secret, I do think that many of them would say, we just want this to be over with. We want to put our governing majority in place and basically begin the new Congress. And so some of them might change their votes. But the problem is, whoever is elected, Kevin McCarthy or someone else, is going to have to then lead the Republican caucus in the House. And it would be tremendously weakening to them to basically have been elected in secret, to have members still signaling that they're not willing to publicly support their speakership. And there would be a ton of infighting and a ton of intrigue for the entire duration of this Congress about who it was who voted to put him in place. And so I do think that if there's any way to find a consensus candidate, it doesn't seem like it's going to be McCarthy at this point. It would be much better for them to do that in public, cast their votes for that person, and give them the legitimacy to actually move forward as the leader of the Republicans in the House.